Officer Brilo was charged with 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter following a lengthy car chase and shootout back in 2012. I wanted to discuss this morning with Patrick Oliver. He spent almost 28 years in the police in the state of Ohio. In fact, the former police chief of the Cleveland PD, now a professor of criminal justice at Cedarville University. Chief Oliver, really a pleasure to talk to you, especially in search of answers about what we can do to fix some of these challenges that is facing law enforcement. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michaela.
I have read some background, and you have talked about a couple of problems that you see that you look at as sort of paramount to what's going on right now. You've talked about the fact that you believe police hire their problems and that departments need to hire people who are compatible with policing. That seems to be one of those, of course, but what do you mean by that, and what is the ideal personality trait of a police officer?
The most effective decision a manager can make in policing is to hire a great employee. There are 5 key things that police officers should have that get hired in the police department.
Okay.
1, they should have high moral character. 2, they should be service-oriented. 3, they should have good human relations skills. 4, they should be compatible team members. And 5, they should be performance-driven.
Okay, that seems to make sense. But are you seeing that that is not necessarily being adhered to in police stations across the country?
I think when you look at these high-profile police shootings, the key issue, more than policy, procedure, training, and tactics, is the character of the individual involved in the shooting itself.
Well, we know that it is getting more and more dangerous. It seems to be more dangerous to be a police officer these days. Do you think that that might be driving some people away from signing up to be an officer?
Yes, a little bit, but policing is still a highly desirable profession. So a lot of people still want to be a police officer because they know they can do a lot of good.
We also talk about the need for constitutional-based policing. Obviously, it sounds simple enough that officers should follow the Constitution, but it isn't always. Talk to us about that.
The Constitution of the United States, protecting that is the primary responsibility of every peace officer. The Constitution is not something to get under or around. The Constitution is the primary purpose of the job. So police officers have to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Did you find that that wasn't happening when you were police chief?
In some cases, but police officers, I think, need to understand that they're there to protect the Constitution and support the Constitution and not violate it.
So I want to get more of your perspective of being a former police chief. When you were in the position that you would be called on to handle potential scenarios like the ones that we're seeing play out, one of the things that we learned in Cleveland was that the judge decided to announce his verdict on a Saturday of a holiday weekend. As a former member of that community, do you agree with that decision? Do you think it was wise?
I think that was a good decision. That was very strategic. You know, kids are not in school, people are on a holiday, and so there's going to be less crowds and less potential for violence and injury and harm. So I think that was a good decision.
What if Officer Brilo was your officer? How would you have dealt with the situation? What would you say to him?
Well, I think that Officer Brilo is being handled properly by the Cleveland Police Department. They put him on administrative leave. There was a criminal investigation. There was a prosecution of him. Now that that's over, there's going to be an administrative hearing for him and the other officers involved. So I don't think you try to talk to him personally. In a situation, you handle it administratively.
We also know that the Justice Department last year found a pattern of unreasonable and unnecessary force within that department. What is your sense of why that is occurring there in Cleveland?
Well, they've outlined those issues that they have with the Cleveland Police Department. They're going to be negotiating stipulations, and they're going to go into a consent decree.
Right.
And in that consent decree, Cleveland will have to address all those issues.
But what do you think is the problem
department.
there in Cleveland?
I think they need to deal with use of force issue. They need to deal with training. They need to deal with their pursuit policy. They need to teach and train the Constitution. So they need to manage those issues, I think, more effectively. And they would recognize that. Chief Williams and his command staff, they want to get better. They want to improve the department. They want to improve their relations with the community, particularly the African American community.
Do you feel hopeful?
I feel very hopeful. I think that they're prepared, they're interested, they're willing to make a difference.
Well, let's hope that is the case, because certainly there are many that agree that things need to change. We've got to better that relationship between our officers and the Black community and communities of color. Chief Oliver, thanks so much for joining us today and giving your perspective.